It was a creed written into the founding documents that declared the destiny of a nation. Yes, we can. It was whispered by slaves and abolitionists as they blazed the trail toward freedom. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
It was sung
by immigrants as they struck out the distant shores, pioneers who pushed westward against the unforgiving wilderness. Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
It was the call of workers organized, women who reached for the ballots, a president who chose the moon as our new front.
On the 27th of October 2019, the title of our episode is Congressman Elijah Cummings of Maryland. Congressman Cummings died recently on the 17th of October, and his memorial service was held in Baltimore, West Baltimore, on a Friday. A number of people participated, and we have an edited version which follows us. They included Hillary Clinton. She started it out. And then we had Michelle Obama. President Obama was also there. And the former President William Clinton was also there, that gave an address during the funeral ceremony, which we have that follows. What we decided to do here was start this out with an op-ed in the Washington Post. Let me get my glasses on here. On October the 26th. This is Elijah Cummings, a Democrat representing the 7th Congressional District of Maryland. This op-ed was adopted from a forward that Cummings wrote on July 17th for the forthcoming book, In Defense of Public Service, How 22 Million Government Workers Will Save Our Republic, by Cedric L. Alexander. As I pen these words, we are living through a time in our nation's history when powerful forces are seeking to divide us one from another, when legitimacy of our constitutional institutions is under attack, when factually supported truth itself has come under relentless challenge. I'm among those who have not lost confidence in our ability to right the ship of American democratic life, but I also realize that we are in a fight for the soul of our democracy. As an American of color, I have been able to receive an excellent public education, become an attorney, and serve my community and my country in both the Maryland General Assembly and the Congress because of one important fact. American of conscience, from every political vantage point, took our Constitution seriously and fought for my right to be all that I could become. This is the personal debt that I and so many others in my heritage owe to our democratic republic, to the 20 million plus Americans who served our republic and its values in our nation's civil service. And this is also why I personally will remain in the fight to preserve our republic and humanity and equal values as its foundation for as long as I draw breath. It is our Constitution, and not to any political perspective or party, that I gave my oath when I became an officer of the court, when I joined the Maryland legislature, and when I was elected to Congress. It is a commitment that I bring to my work as chairman of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform, the committee that has direct oversight of our federal civil service. For more than 2 decades of experience performing this oversight, I can confirm that our nation's federal employees deserve our respect, gratitude, and support. When people in the leadership of the nation attack our courts, as members of our Congress and our civil servants, our media, They're attacking the glue that holds our diverse nation together as the United States of America. When these attackers do so on a basis of factually unfounded opinions rather than verifiable evidence, they are engaging in demagoguery of the most dangerous sort. That is why our civil service, committed to maintaining the rule of law and decision-making based on verifiable facts, is so important to maintaining the legitimacy of our government, both elected and appointed. Under our democratic republic, elected leaders make policy but must rely on civil servants appointed on the basis of merit to implement those public policies. We must rely on the expertise of our merit-based civil service if we wish to have a government that addresses the factual realities of our life, to the extent that human beings can ever achieve that goal. The duty to find and implement the truth, as I have mentioned, is the province of our civil servants, whether they serve in Washington, our states, or in the law enforcement agencies of our country. This is not to say that our government agencies always get it right or that they never overreach. Human beings, however talented and well-meaning, make mistakes. A citizen of the greatest democratic republic in the world, we have the privilege and duty to recall our nation's founding and to engage our nation on the basis of these fundamental principles. I hold fast the conviction that because of the functioning, indeed their legitimacy, our democratic system has been on attack from some. I'm speaking, of course, of the continuous attacks on our elections, from the source both foreign and domestic, and of the failure of too many of my colleagues in Congress and the White House to adequately defend us from those attacks. For the unity and the future of our republic, our Congress must reassess its constitutional obligation of oversight, seeking and obtaining answers to serious questions of governance that until now have gone unanswered. We must perform this constitutional duty so effectively and convincing that those Americans who support this president and his administration, those who disagree with the reach is shared and a united answer as to how this nation must proceed. I remain confident that we can fulfill this historic duty. To succeed, however, we need our federal civil service and the Americans who serve us there to give us their complete and unbiased cooperation. To that extent we are required to do so, we will enforce the cooperation through actions in our courts, but I sincerely hope that the route will seldom be necessary. To that end, I close with this pledge in the words of my heroine, former Congresswoman Bobbitt Jordan from 1994. My faith in the Constitution as whole is complete, it's total. And I'm not going to sit here and be an idle spectator to the demolition and the subversion or destruction of the Constitution. I hope and trust that all Americans feel and will do so, and will do the same. Barbara Jordan, incidentally, was a representative from Houston, Texas, and she was also one of the major participants committee known as the Watergate Committee that was engaged in the impeachment of Richard Milhouse Nixon, but Nixon resigned before literally the articles could be formally voted on. I think this serves as a part of the ceremony on Friday from Elijah Cummings himself. He obviously could not participate. He was there lying in state on the flag-draped casket, but Nancy Pelosi and others did in fact enact his thoughts on this this epoch in the history of the American Republic. Now, I didn't say the American democracy, but the American Republic, that is a democratic in form, that started out as a divided nation, that authorized slavery in its constitution, that had men of Elijah Cummings' type or ancestors as 3/5 of a human being, that permitted the lynching, deaths, and enslavement of millions of African Americans. But yet this man from Baltimore, his parents are coming from the South, out of this epoch of quasi-slavery called sharecropping. And they were able to gain employment in Baltimore, and he was able to later attend law school in spite of some of his teachers thinking that he did not have the intellectual wherewithal to do it. He did it. And he made it to the General Assembly, became a politician, and to the Congress of the United States. Bill Clinton was telling a story about it when he first met Elijah Cummings. It must have been in the 96 election, the last day before the Tuesday of the election, and his staff had advised him, why waste time, because the people of Baltimore, meaning the followers of O.J. Simpson, would vote for the Democratic Party, so why go to something, a rally for this Congress type named Elijah Cummings that nobody really knew anything about, period. But nonetheless, Clinton went and met Elijah Cummings at a church there in Baltimore, and as they say, the rest was history. But an important fact about Representative Cummings, he was one of the first Democratic leaders. He had been chair of the Congressional Black Caucus to endorse Barack Obama of Chicago, Senator Obama, in the 2008 election. But yet Hillary Clinton appeared there at his funeral. So a very interesting type of commentary on him, on Elijah Cummings. We felt that we needed to bring this out to the people because of the continuous history of the Congress, not only of the Black Caucus, but of Elijah Cummings. And of course, Elijah Cummings, one of his last official acts from the hospice was to sign some subpoenas, and the bishop that was presiding, I forget his name right now, said he didn't know that Elijah was still working. And as Elijah's wife said, his last breath basically was devoted to the business of the Congress. He had been in ill health since 2017, had valve replacement. He also, at the same time, he had a number of other things that had happened to him, related illnesses there. So he was a man that had many things going on, but yet he was able to move around in a motorized scooter, and sometimes he even had oxygen there, but yet he persevered onwards. And what that shows is people that are in a service to humanity, as Elijah Cummings, can do things that others would see as superhuman. As the late President Saddam Hussein once said, it is the duty of, and I'm paraphrasing here from the Arabic, it is the duty of us to serve humanity. And that's what Elijah Cummings, in the final analysis, not only of the American people, but the humanity in terms of where we are and where we're going in this great situation called the life blood of the human species. And that is more at work than anything else there. And if we look back, whether it be to Dr. King or to many other people, we understand that this is a continual history. As Elijah Cummings stood on the shoulders of Dr. King and the martyrs of the civil rights movement, whether it be Malcolm X, Kwame Ture, etc. Those people made the history that we move forward on. So that's why it's very important for younger people to understand the basic history of the country, to take history. Because if you don't take history and you're not taught history, you end up falling a victim, as in the Congressional report, to these so-called targeted messages. And they were targeted after African Americans. Now, when we start talking about targeted messages, yes, some did come from the Russian Federation, but they were a small part of what happened. Voter suppression in places like Tennessee, and that is something that Congressman Cummings addressed continuously. And other types of situations there, education, miseducation, and the sorry condition of the public schools in America. And in Chicago, teachers on strike there to try to alleviate some of the problems in terms of services that the students, particularly on the south and west side of Chicago, are receiving, and the type of education that they're receiving in terms of class size. So we have those kinds of situations out there, because if you're just watching a YouTube or Facebook, anything can appear there, and it's in a vacuum. Because if you missed out on the history of the civil rights struggle, you really don't understand what went on there, how people actually died for the vote. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean a person is obligated to vote, no. But they have to understand why people vote, and why people died to vote, and why the system is where it is. So when we look, for instance, to the national administration, DJ Trump, it is not DJ Trump, it is the system. And there have been various polemic working papers, studies done on what happened in the 2016 election. Well, it was a combination of things, but one of the primary things there was voter suppression in Wisconsin under Boss Walker, voter suppression in Pennsylvania under the Republican legislature, and the very restrictive, draconian voting laws that they had. These voting ID laws suppress voter participation on the part of communities of color, particularly followers of O.J. Simpson, African Americans, and they scare away Latinos. This is deliberate. 5 or 6% of the vote can be suppressed, and that does mean something in Pennsylvania. It does mean something in Ohio. It does mean what went on in Michigan under Gateway Snyder there and the Republican legislature, and how they suppressed the vote in Detroit. So these are things that are out there that the Congress has to address, and they need to be investigated. And the plight of the federal workers, it's a national disgrace. What has happened to federal workers in terms of constant criticism, being subject to unjust layoffs, redundancy, in other words, the gutting of these departments that perform valuable services, such as the FAA, and what happened Max Boeing airliner, by giving those inspection responsibilities to the Boeing's company. In Seattle, they call it Boeing's and not Boeing. Anyway, nonetheless, that is what happened with the Food and Drug Administration, the meat inspectors, and various other inspectors out of the Department of Agriculture. They have been cut to the bare bone. And these are the things that we have to face, and we have to make the prophetic words of Elijah Cummings stand up on the sheet of paper in which they were written. This is Boston Red and the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth on the of October 2019. We'll have, incidentally, the Monday morning quarterback and a numbers man. That is our financial program here at WBRN and the Boston Red Network. They will come this week. And we also have on the table Bernie Sanders' production. That is when Bernie was back in Queens. It is just about finished up. It'll also fly up there. And, of course, our regular program, the Monday morning quarterback.
This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Because this is the day for the homegoing celebration of a great man, a moral leader, and a friend. To Bishop Walter Scott Thomas and First Lady of the Church, Patricia Thomas, and the New Psalmist Baptist Church, thank you for welcoming us all here to reflect on the life and celebrate the service of Elijah Cummings. And to the Cummings family, to his political family, the constituents from the Maryland Congressional 7th District, thank you for sharing him with our country and the world. And thank you, Maya. As you have said so beautifully, you walked by Elijah's side on this journey. Thank you for your steadfastness, your resilience, and your leadership. It is no coincidence, is it, that Elijah Cummings shared a name with an Old Testament prophet, whose name meant in Hebrew, "The Lord is my God," and who used the power and the wisdom that God gave him to uphold the moral law that all people are subject to, and because of all people are equal. Like the prophet, our Elijah could call down fire from heaven, but he also prayed and worked for healing. He weathered storms and earthquakes, but never lost his faith. Like that Old Testament prophet, he stood against corrupt leadership of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. And he looked out for the vulnerable among us. He lifted up the next generation of leaders. He even worked a few miracles. And he kept reminding us, life is no dress rehearsal. The American people want to live their lives without fear of their leaders. And as leaders, we have a responsibility to keep the promises made when running for office to make the lives of Americans better. As Elijah said, while we're all on this earth, that's my message. Our Elijah was a fierce champion for truth, justice, and kindness in every part of his life. His integrity and character, his can-do spirit, made him a guiding light in the Congress. He pushed back against the abuse of power. He was unwavering in his defense of our democracy. He had little tolerance for those who put party ahead of country or partisanship above truth. But he could find common ground with anyone willing to seek it with him. And he liked to remind all of us that you can't get so caught up in who you are fighting that you forget what you are fighting for. Even his political adversaries recognized that it wasn't really about politics for our Elijah. He led from his soul. He often said that our children are a message to a future we will never see. I saw that firsthand when I attended an event for the Elijah Cummings youth program in Israel. A leadership program for young people in his district. And Elijah didn't just put his name on the program and then forget about it. He interviewed every applicant. He was personally invested in their success. He wanted all of us to see our young people as he memorably asked us to do when he gave the eulogy at the funeral for Freddie Gray. Did you see him? By the time these young people came back from Israel to Baltimore, They had celebrated Shabbat, studied Hebrew, hiked up Masada. They had seen and been seen and made lifelong friends, all because Elijah Cummings knew from his own experiences that it's one thing to learn abstractly about the world, but another to experience it with people different from yourself, learning from each other, lifting each other up. You know, Elijah often said his philosophy was simple: do something. Go out and do something. No matter how daunting a problem seems, no matter how helpless you feel, surely there is something you can do. I think that remains his challenge to each of us. As he said, even if it seems small, there's usually something you can do if you are looking for it. You can defend the truth. You can defend democracy. You can lift up others. And toward the end of his life, he said, I am begging the American people to pay attention to what is going on. Because if you want to have a democracy intact for your children and your children's children and generations yet unborn, we have got to guard this moment. This is our watch. Our Elijah knew, because he was a man of faith and a man of the church, that life was fleeting and precious. And that's why he worked so hard to make every moment of his life count. When we're dancing with the angels, the question will be asked, he said, in 2019, what did we do to make sure we kept our democracy intact? I will end with the paraphrase of a poem that Elijah recited in his very first speech in the Congress. He said that he told himself this poem as many as 20 times a day. I only have a minute, 60 seconds in it. Forced upon me, I did not choose it, but I know that I must use it. Give account if I abuse it, suffer if I lose it. Only a tiny little minute, but eternity is in it. Thank you, Elijah Cummings, for your work, your service, and the lessons you leave us. God bless you.
Thank you, Bishop Thomas, for bringing us under this beautiful auspices to pay tribute to our darling, precious Elijah. Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President. Madam Secretary, Archbishop Laurie, Bishop, members of the clergy, distinguished guests who are all here for our darling Elijah. As Speaker of the House, I have the sad honor and personal privilege to bring the condolences of the entire Congress of the United States to Maya, the Cummings family, the people, the constituents of Elijah's district, people of Baltimore, to our entire country. I say that with great authority because yesterday, my friends and those of you who loved Elijah, yesterday, Maya gave us the privilege of having a celebration of Elijah's life in the capital of the United States. The first African-American lawmaker ever to serve in repose lie in repose in the Capitol. It was so beautiful. And as has been referenced, Elijah brought people together in life of different parties and in his death of different parties. And that's why I'm so pleased that yesterday's service was very bipartisan. In fact, it took bipartisan agreement for Elijah to lie in repose on the same catapult that Abraham Lincoln lay in repose in the Capitol. And so today we have a very strong bipartisan of Elijah's colleagues from the House of Representatives, led by our chair of the Black Caucus, Karen Bass, our leader, Steny Hoyer, John Lewis, Marcia, who got the nod, and I'm happy to get it as well, and so many of our members of the House in a bipartisan fashion. Please rise to be recognized. And their families and their staff, Elijah's staff. John Lewis, where are you, John Lewis? And we had a strong representation from the United States Senate in a bipartisan way yesterday. Today also led by Ben Cardin and Chris Van Hollen, bringing so many senators here today. Bishop Thomas, how brilliant was it of Elijah's parents to name him Elijah? As the secretary said, the Lord, the God is my Lord. And as we know from the Old Testament, there is a tradition to leave a seat at the table for Elijah who might show up. But our Elijah always made a seat at the table for others. He made a seat at the table for children who needed an education, for even new members of Congress so that he could mentor them, for all who wanted to be part of the American dream. Elijah himself personally lived the American dream, and he wanted everyone else to have that opportunity, hence many seats at the table. How fortunate for our country that his parents also taught him to live up to his name. How blessed are we all to know him and to benefit from his friendship and his leadership. Elijah was a proud man, proud of his heritage, proud of Baltimore, and proud of America. He always appealed to our better angels and to the promise of America, calling us to live up to our principles and for a higher purpose. As he said, and this is so, all the words that we will use that are the best words are words that Elijah used, was when we were not meeting the needs of children in our country, he said, "We are better than this." He held himself to a high standard, and that is why I've called him the North Star of Congress, our guiding light. Thank you, Maya, for giving me this opportunity to speak at the Baltimore celebration as well as yesterday of Elijah's life. Previously, I've seen some of you over time speaking as Speaker of the House before at St. James Episcopal Church to speak at the funeral service for Congressman Parren Mitchell, a sad and proud day for the Baltimore community and our country that day. Paying tribute to Parren was both an official and a personal honor. My D'Alessandro family and the Mitchell family had been friends for generations. Now it is my great honor and personal sadness to join you at the New Psalmist Baptist Church, Elijah's Church, to celebrate Elijah's life. As I said, yesterday, members of Congress said goodbye to Elijah. Maya gave us the honor again of holding that official service in the statuary hall of the House. At that time, I said this was appropriate because Elijah was master of the house. Master of the house. In his chairmanship of the Committee on Oversight and Reform, he lived up to his responsibilities to hold the federal government accountable to the laws of the land. One word I would use to describe Elijah over and over again is the word future. He was there to make the future for our children, whom he called, as has been said, our living messengers to a future we will never see. But he wanted for those children to have a future worthy of their aspirations, and he wanted them to have a future built on our values, continue to be built on our family. And as the master of the house, he was also the mentor of the house. Does anybody in here be mentored by Elijah Cummings? I think so. It was no surprise that when we had this election and we won the Congress that Elijah said, send me as many freshmen as you can because I want to help them be oriented to reach their fullest potential in the House of Representatives. So wonderful that he did that. And all members, whether new or not, benefited from the generosity of his spirit, sometimes the candor of how we do our work. Whether we asked or not, the candor was there. And again, it was an honor to share, again, some of these thoughts about our dear Elijah. Elijah loved Baltimore and his district. He was my Baltimore brother in Congress. We had our chats about Baltimore all the time. He loved and respected his constituents. By example, he gave people hope. By his courage, he fought for what is right. By his brilliance, knowledge, and legal prowess, he made a difference in so many ways, fighting for gun violence prevention, expanding opportunity for everyone, recognizing, now this was most recent, recognizing the cost of prescription drugs hurt the health and economic well-being of America's working families. He was willing to reach across the aisle, even across the Capitol, even down Pennsylvania Avenue. So it should be a source of pride to all of us who loved Elijah that the committee chairman immediately named H.R. 3, the Lower Drug Cost Act, now the Elijah E. Cummings Lower Cost Drug Act. Our Baltimore connection gave me special entree into the thinking, Elijah's thinking, which helped me as speaker. Our love of the Orioles and the Ravens made it fun. Thank you, Baltimore, for your contribution to the greatness of the United States of America. When I spoke on Wednesday at my brother Tommy D'Alessandro's service, I acknowledged that we would be honoring Elijah today. We lost two great leaders in 1 week, we did in Baltimore. One of the things that Elijah, my brother Tommy, and I, being from Baltimore, and I representing San Francisco, had in common was the pride we took in Baltimore, our Baltimore. Another thing Tommy, Elijah, and I had, and I, in representing San Francisco, had in common that our hearts are full of love for America. But I used to tell them in San Francisco, for us, love means letting other versions exist. And that's exactly what Elijah did. Respecting the views of others, reaching across the aisle, building community and consensus. Thank you, Maya. Thank you to the children and to your entire family for sharing Elijah with us and for loving him so much. You were the source of his strength and inspiration. I hope it is a comfort to you that so many people...
It is my honor and privilege to serve you, and he meant every word of it. To Baltimore County, he enjoyed serving you as well, so thank you so much for supporting and working with him. To all his congressional colleagues, it was a distinct honor and privilege to walk beside you, to fight the good fight. The Congressional Black Caucus he was a proud member of and once led. To all the leadership of the Senate and certainly the House, Nancy Pelosi, thank you He considered you his mentor. President Obama, he was so proud. He was so proud to stand with you and for you early, to be your co-chair here in the state of Maryland, to serve as your chief defense attorney on the House Oversight Committee, and to make sure that you and your administration were all right. But you didn't have any challenges like we got going on now. So his job became harder over time. That being said, President Clinton, he was absolutely honored to be your friend. He counted you amongst his friend. When he invited you, you showed up. One of the proudest moments of his life when you came right here to New Psalmist Baptist Church and worshiped with us. We thank you so much. Secretary Clinton, oh my goodness. He spent many an hour defending you against spurious claims. And now he had to go on to actually work to fight for the soul of our democracy against very real corruption.
Honorable William Jefferson Clinton, 42nd President of the United States, and the Honorable Barack Obama, the 44th President of the United States. They're going to come in that order and share their thoughts now. Will you greet President William Clinton?
Thank you very much, Bishop. Maya, all the members of the family and honorees. Bishop, I thank you for many things, but especially for the decades of guidance and genuine friendship you gave to Elijah. It is true that almost exactly 21 years ago, he invited me to New Psalmist on the Sunday before the election. And I remember, I loved that you introduced the staff, because we'd all be dead without the people that are helping us. But if you're president, your staff is always trying to tell you why you shouldn't do something or you shouldn't go somewhere. I remember this very well. They said, it's Tuesday, Sunday before the election. Why would you go? I get why you want to go to an African-American church, but why would you go to Baltimore? I mean, come on. They're so good to you. They always vote for you. And why would you go for Elijah Cummings? He's been in the House 15 minutes. He literally hadn't finished one term yet. I said, I just got a feeling this is something we ought to do. And if we do it, we'll know whether it was right or not. And so the bishop rolls out the red carpet. Thousands of people were there. And you may remember we got in some trouble, didn't we? We got in some trouble. People criticized us for having a get out the vote event in a church. They said it was inappropriate. And as I remember, Elijah reminded people that our constitutional rights, including the freedom of religion, the freedom of assembly, the freedom of speech, depended on people giving voice to them in elections. End of debate. Then, I got to listen to Elijah talk that day. You talk about a lousy deal. It was, I had to follow both the bishop and Elijah Cummings. And at least I'm getting in ahead of you and President Obama today. I'm just in my old age, I'm the warm-up act. I'm glad to do it. Anyway, Elijah was great. And he ended with his quiet and reasoned and rhythmic voice growing into his booming voice by quoting that wonderful verse from the 40th chapter of Isaiah. They who wait upon the Lord will have their strength renewed. They will run up with wings as eagles. They will run and not go weary. They will walk and faint not. And he just kept doing more and more. The crowd was going over the course of these last few days. I've had the chance to think a lot about Elijah's life. He really did sort of mirror Isaiah, who had one of the greatest one-liners in the history of human affairs. When the Lord asked, "Whom shall I send and who will go for me?" Isaiah said, "Here am I, Lord, send me." Elijah Cummings spent a whole life saying, "Send me." An entire lifetime. He's not even a teenager when he hauls down to the swimming pool and joins a group to integrate it, and for his trouble gets banged on the head with a glass bottle, leaving him a lifetime scar, which he bore with honor. And then the people of Baltimore sent him to Annapolis, and then you sent him to Washington. On behalf of the rest of the nation, I'd like to thank you. You did a good thing. And then I was looking over all the things that he worked on just in the 4 years we were together. He was elected the year I was reelected, 1996. He had this amazing array of interests. But we all know now that at least until certain things happen, his legacy is how ardently he honored his oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. I think he did it for a lot of reasons. He loved the fact that his parents' humble lives made his a great American story. And he loved that it confirmed his faith, but he knew that without the Constitution, the laws that were passed under it, the rights that were guaranteed by it, and the abuses it was designed to prevent, without that Constitution, he would not have been in Congress. And so he said to himself, "I am certain every day I will not let this promise be sullied." And he did his best. And while doing his best and fighting his heart out, sticking up for Hillary and lots of other people, many of whom were voiceless and weak and will never be known. While doing all that, he actually made, in one of the most partisan periods in our country's history, a lot of Republican friends. Why did he do that? How did he do that? I think he did it because everybody could see he was a real deal. He was doing what he believed. His heart was in it. And I think he did it Because no matter how hard he fought and how passionately he argued, he tried to treat everybody the way he wanted to be treated, the way he thought America should be treated. You know, you can't run a free society if you have to hate everybody you disagree with. I mean, sooner or later, if you've been married 45 years and both of you are thinking, you're going to have a disagreement or two. Sooner or later, if you're in a business or a team or in a campaign and you're thinking, you're going to have disagreements. He believed that he should treat people the way he wanted to be treated. And he believed if everybody accepted his broad, endearing, inclusive definition of one America, where we respect our differences and think what we have in common matters more, and we all live under the same set of rules, and we all believe that under those rules, those of us who have more than we need should do more to help those who don't have enough, that everything would work out okay. Now, that's what he believed. And being friends, he was so proud that he could help resolve the personal spat between his Republican congressional friend and new member of the Democratic caucus. But he believed. So here's what I want to leave you with. Elijah spent his working life in the tradition of Isaiah. He went again and again and again. But I think in his lasting legacy to us, we should think again about the prophet Elisha for this reason. He was about to be killed for his ardent promotion of his faith. He hid in a cave, either within or next to Mount Sinai. He received a message from God to go up and stand on top of the mountain and wait for the voice of God to speak to him. So look, he'd already had a pretty hard time. Just like at the end of Elijah's life, he's already had a pretty hard time. You got to go through this too. So there's Elijah standing on the mountain. And a huge wind came, so strong it broke the rocks of the mountain. But the Lord was not in the wind. Then an earthquake came, shaking everything. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. Then the fire came. But the Lord was not in the fire. And then, what does the scripture say? A still, small voice. Elijah, by that point, had gotten rid of all the pomp, all the circumstance, all the glory for the still small voice. I love this man. I loved every minute I ever spent with him, every conversation we ever had. I loved his booming voice. But we should hear him now in the quiet times at night and in the morning when we need courage. When we get discouraged and we don't know if we can believe anymore, we should hear him. Let our Elisha be for us what he himself heard. A still small voice. It keeps us going, keeps us grateful, keeps us happy, and keeps us moving. Thank you, and God bless you.
To the Bishop and First Lady and the new Psalmist family, to the Cummings family, President, Madam Secretary, Madam Speaker, Governor, friends, colleagues, staff, the seeds on good soil the parable of the sower tells us stands for those with a noble and good heart who hear the word, retain it, and by persevering, produce a crop. The seed on good soil. Elijah Cummings came from good soil. And in this sturdy frame, goodness took root. His parents were sharecroppers from the South. They picked tobacco and strawberries and then sought something better in this city, South Baltimore. And Robert worked shifts at a plant, and Ruth cleaned other people's homes. They became parents of 7, preachers to a small flock. I remember I had the pleasure of meeting Elijah's mother, Ruth, and she told me she prayed for me every day. And I knew it was true. And I felt better for it. Sometimes people say they're praying for you, and you don't know. They might be praying about you, but you don't know if they're praying for you. But I knew Miss Ruth was telling the truth. So they were the proverbial salt of the earth. And they passed on that strength and that grit, but also that kindness and that faith to their son. As a boy, Elijah's dad made him shine his shoes and tie his tie, and they'd go to the airport, not to board the airplanes, but to watch others do it. I remember Elijah telling me this story. Robert would say, "I have not flied, I may not fly, but you will fly one day. We can't afford it right now, but you will fly." As grandmother, as Elijah related, and as grandmothers do, was a little more impatient with her advice. Your daddy, she said, he's been waiting and waiting and waiting for a better day. Don't you wait. And Elijah did not wait. Against all odds, Elijah earned his degrees. He learned about the rights that all people in this country are supposed to possess, with little help apparently from Perry Mason. Elijah became a lawyer to make sure that others had rights. And his people had their God-given rights. And from the State House to the House of Representatives, his commitment to justice and the rights of others would never, ever waver. Elijah's example, a son of parents who rose from nothing to carve out just a little something, a public servant who toiled to guarantee the least of us have the same opportunities that he had earned. A leader who once said he'd die for his people, even as he lived every minute for them. His life validates the things we tell ourselves about what's possible in this country. Not guaranteed, but possible. The possibility that our destinies are not preordained, but rather through our works and our dedication and our willingness to open our hearts to God's message of love for all people, we can live a purposeful life, that we can reap a bountiful harvest, that we are neither sentenced to wither among the rocks nor assured a bounty, but we have the capacity, the chance, as individuals and as a nation, to root ourselves in good soil. Elijah understood that. That's why he fought for justice. That's why he embraced this beloved community of Baltimore. That's why he went on to fight for the rights and opportunities of forgotten people all across America, not just in his district. He was never complacent, for he knew that without clarity of purpose and a steadfast faith and the dogged determination demanded by our liberty, the promise of this nation can wither. Complacency, he knew, was not only corrosive for our collective lives, but for our individual lives. It's been remarked that Elijah was a kind man. I tell my daughters, and I have to say, listening to Elijah's daughters speak, that got me choked up. I'm sure those of you who have sons feel the same way, but there's something about daughters and their father. And I was thinking I'd want my daughters to know how much I love them, but I'd also want them to know that being a strong man includes being kind. That there's nothing weak about kindness and compassion. There's nothing weak about looking out for others. There's nothing weak about being honorable. You're not a sucker to have integrity and to treat others with respect. I was sitting here and I was just noticing the Honorable Elijah E. Cummings. And, you know, this is a title that we confer on all kinds of people who get elected to public office. We're supposed to introduce them as honorable. But Elijah Cummings was honorable before he was elected to office. There's a difference. There's a difference if you were honorable and treated others honorably outside the limelight, on the side of a road, in a quiet moment, counseling somebody you work with. Letting your daughters know you love them. You know, as president, I knew I could always count on Elijah being honorable and doing the right thing. And people have talked about his voice. There is something about his voice that just made you feel better. You know, there's some people, they have that deep baritone, a prophetic voice. And when it was good times and we achieved victories together, that voice and that laugh was a gift. But you needed it more during the tough times, when the path ahead looked crooked, when obstacles abounded, when I entertained doubts, or I saw those who were in the fight start to waver. That's when Elijah's voice mattered most. And more than once during my presidency, when the economy still looked like it might plunge into depression, when the health care bill was pronounced dead in Congress, I would watch Elijah rally his colleagues. The cost of doing nothing isn't nothing, he would say. And folks would remember why they entered into public service. Our children are the living messengers we send to a future we will never see, he would say. And he would remind all of us that our time is too short not to fight for what's good and what is true and what is best in America. "200 years to 300 years from now," he would say, people will look back at this moment and they will ask the question, what did you do? And hearing him, we would be reminded that it falls upon each of us to give voice to the voiceless and comfort to the sick, an opportunity to those not born to it, and to preserve and nurture our democracy. Elijah Cummings was a man of noble and good heart. His parents and his faith planted the seeds of hope and love and compassion and righteousness in that good soil of his. He has harvested all the crop that he could. For the Lord has now called Elijah home to give his humble, faithful servant rest. And it now falls on us to continue his work, so that other young boys and girls in Baltimore, across Maryland, across the United States, and around the world might too have a chance to grow and to flourish. That's how we will honor him. That's how we will remember him. That's what he would hope for. May God bless the memory of the very honorable Elijah Cummings. And may God bless this city and this state and this nation that he loved. God bless you. Thank you.